Okay, so have you ever wondered why some relationships just seem to flow? Like everything's easy and natural, but then there are others that feel like you're constantly pulling a rope in a tug of war. You know what I mean? I remember this one date I went on, and the guy spent half the time talking about his ex. And not in a good way, like, oh, I learned so much from my past relationships. It was more like my ex was the best thing that ever happened to me kind of vibe. It was so awkward. And honestly, I've been on the other side of that too. You know, the one who's a little too invested, like analyzing every single text message as if it's some secret code. Turns out a lot of this relationship drama might actually be tied to this thing called attachment styles. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to unpack all of it using the book Attached as our guide. So, what are attachment styles? Basically, they're these patterns that we develop in relationships. And it starts way back when we're infants with our caregivers. It's all about how we learn to get our needs met. We're our caregivers consistently there for us, emotionally and physically.
Or were they more distant? These early experiences can totally shape how we view intimacy and connection later on in life. The book Attached breaks down these patterns into three main attachment styles: secure, anxious, and avoidant. Secure people are generally pretty comfortable with intimacy. They don't freak out if their partner needs some space, and they trust that their partner will come back. They're kind of like the relationship superheroes, you know. Then we have the anxious attachment style. And let's just say I've definitely dabbled in this territory myself. This one's all about craving deep connection, but also constantly worrying, like, do they really love me? Are they going to leave? All that fun stuff. Honestly, it can be exhausting. And lastly, we've got the avoidant attachment style. These are the folks who really value their independence and tend to build these walls around their hearts. Getting too close, sharing their feelings, not really their thing. They'd rather keep things light and breezy, emotionally speaking. So for a long time, people thought that these attachment styles were set in stone. Like you were either secure, anxious, or avoidant, and that was it.
But attached actually challenges that. It suggests that, yeah, our early experiences definitely played a big role, but our attachment styles can change throughout our lives, which is kind of hopeful, right? Like we're not doomed to repeat the same patterns over and over again. One of the most interesting things I learned from Attached was this concept called the dependency paradox. Basically, it says the more secure we feel in our relationships, the more independent we actually become. Kind of counterintuitive, right? But think about it. If you know you've got this solid foundation of love and support, you're way more likely to take risks, pursue your passions, and just generally be more confident in yourself. It's like having a secure base camp when you're climbing a mountain. You can always come back to a place of safety and comfort, so you're more willing to venture out and explore new things. Attached even talks about this one study where researchers scanned people's brains while they were anticipating getting an electric shock. I know, not the most fun experiment.
But anyway, they found that the people who were holding their partner's hand showed way less stress than those who were alone, or even holding a stranger's hand. And here's the kicker. The people who benefited the most from holding their partner's hand were the ones who reported having the happiest marriages. It just shows the power of a secure connection, right? Like just knowing that someone's there for you literally and figuratively can make a huge difference. So why is all of this important? Well, understanding your attachment style can honestly be a game changer in your relationships. It can help you understand your own needs and reactions, like why you might get triggered in certain situations or why you behave in certain ways. It also helps you understand your partner's needs and reactions, even if they're totally different from yours. And finally, it can help you break free from unhealthy patterns that might be preventing you from having really fulfilling, loving relationships. Now, you're probably wondering, how do I figure out my attachment style? Well, we'll definitely get to that. But first, we got to talk about what happens when different attachment styles collide. Cause things can get interesting.
Attached has this whole section on what they call the anxious avoidant trap. And let me tell you, it's a recipe for some serious drama. It's this dynamic where one person is super anxious about the relationship and constantly seeking reassurance and closeness, and the other person is avoidant, pulling away and needing space. Imagine a couple arguing about something like laundry. Sounds mundane, right? But in the context of attachment styles, it can become this whole metaphor for their relationship. Let's say the anxious partner really wants to buy a washing machine for their tiny apartment. On the surface, it's about convenience, but underneath it's about wanting to spend more time together. Like if they have their own washing machine, then their avoidant partner won't have to go do laundry at their mom's house every week. But the avoidant partner sees this as like a threat to their independence. They like having that excuse to get out of the apartment and have some space to themselves. And all of a sudden, this simple decision about a washing machine becomes this battleground for their totally different needs. Attached is full of relatable examples like this, like the romantic bed and breakfast scenario. The anxious partner is super excited to cuddle up in a king-size bed. But the avoidant partner booked a room with 2 twin beds because the view. Again, it's not really about the beds. It's about that underlying tension between wanting to connect and wanting to maintain space. This push and pull can create so much frustration and hurt feelings for both people. But what's interesting is this dynamic isn't about a lack of love. It's about a fundamental mismatch in how each partner experiences and expresses intimacy. Attached talks about this concept called life in the inner circle. Secure people tend to prioritize their partner's well-being and make them feel like royalty, like they're the most important person in their world. Avoidant individuals, on the other hand, can sometimes treat their partner like the enemy, not intentionally, of course, but it comes out through their deactivated strategies. They might withdraw, emotionally shut down conversations, or get defensive when their partner expresses a need. So you might be wondering, why do people stay in these relationships if they're so painful? Well, there are a couple of reasons.
First, there's often this strong initial attraction between anxious and avoidant people. It's the whole opposites attract thing. But then there's also something called the rebound effect, which is especially common for people with an anxious attachment style. When you break up with someone, your attachment system goes kind of haywire. It's like your brain is sending out all these alarm signals saying, go back to your ex, even if you know it's not healthy. It's like your inner voice is screaming, danger, go back to what's familiar. And then there's this tendency to focus on the good times and downplay the bad times. You remember those romantic moments, those intense bursts of connection, and you kind of forget all the times you felt rejected or ignored, like you're wearing those rose-colored glasses. But here's the good news. Even if you're stuck in this anxious avoidant trap, there's still hope. Attached offers some really practical advice for navigating these challenging dynamics and creating healthier and more fulfilling relationships. And that's what we'll dive into next time. Okay, so we've talked about that anxious avoidant trap and how it can really turn your love life into a roller coaster. You know what I mean?
But the good news is, attached doesn't just like leave us hanging there. It actually gives us some really useful strategies for building healthier relationships, no matter what your attachment style is. One of the first things it talks about, especially for those of us who lean towards the anxious side, is how important it is to find a secure partner. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious, right? But let's be real. We don't always make the best choices when it comes to love. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of a new relationship, even if those intense feelings are coming from anxiety and insecurity. Attached talks about recognizing what they call smoking guns early on. Basically, these are those little red flags, those hints that maybe this person isn't going to be able to meet your needs for intimacy and security. It could be anything, really, like inconsistent communication or needing to be the center of attention all the time, or even putting down their exes. Anything that kind of suggests they might not be emotionally available or respectful of your needs. And the key here is to treat those smoking guns like deal breakers, no matter how charming or successful they might seem.
It's about putting your own emotional well-being first and not settling for less than you deserve. I know that can be super tough, especially for us anxious types who tend to overthink everything and give people the benefit of the doubt. We might try to explain away those red flags or convince ourselves that we can change the person, but trust me, it's way better to walk away early than to get stuck in a relationship that's going to drain you emotionally. So what if you're already in a relationship?
Maybe even with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. Is there any hope? Well, according to Attachment Style, yes, there is. It might take some work, but you can create more security and connection even if you and your partner have different attachment styles. One of the most important things the book emphasizes is good communication. And I don't just mean chatting about your day or venting about your problems. This is about being able to clearly and directly express your needs and feelings without blaming or criticizing your partner in a way that invites them to listen and respond with empathy. Now, this can be especially challenging when you're dealing with an avoidant partner.
They might shut down or withdraw when things get a little too intense. But Attached actually offers some helpful advice for avoidant people, too. Like how to be more open and vulnerable while still respecting their need for space and independence. It's all about finding that balance right. You don't have to suddenly become this super touchy-feely person if that's not your style. It's about figuring out ways to connect that feel good for both of you. Another interesting thing Attached talks about is reshaping our working models. These are basically our deep-seated beliefs and expectations about relationships, which we develop early on based on our experiences with our caregivers. These working models can have a huge impact on how we interact with our partners. Like if you have an anxious attachment style, you might have this working model that says people I love are going to leave me eventually. And that belief can unconsciously drive your behavior, making you clingy or super sensitive to any sign of rejection. Attached suggests doing a relationship inventory to better understand your own working model. It's about looking back at your past relationships and noticing those recurring patterns,
And trying to figure out how your beliefs and expectations might be affecting your happiness and love. It can be a really eye-opening experience, helping you see why you might keep attracting certain types of partners or why you react in certain ways when you get triggered. But one of the most empowering things I learned from Attached is that we can actually become more secure, even if we weren't born that way. It's not about changing who you are at your core, but it's about learning those skills and mindsets that can help you have healthier, more fulfilling relationships. The book talks about this idea of the security priming, which is basically finding and learning from those secure people in our lives, like our parents, friends, mentors, even fictional characters, anyone who embodies those qualities that we admire, like being able to communicate effectively, setting healthy boundaries, and handling conflicts in a healthy way. By observing these secure people and paying attention to how they navigate their relationships, we can start to internalize those behaviors and try them out in our own lives. Now, this isn't about copying someone else's personality or trying to be someone you're not.
It's about identifying those core secure traits and figuring out how to practice them in your own unique way. And the more you practice those secure behaviors, the more natural they'll become. And you'll be more likely to attract and build relationships with other secure people. So are you ready to start putting all this into practice? Because in the last part of our deep dive, we're going to talk about some specific strategies for breaking free from those unhealthy patterns and creating the kind of loving relationships we all deserve. Okay, so we've talked about a lot in this deep dive into attachment styles. The different styles, anxious, avoidant, trap, and how to cultivate more security in our relationships. But now let's get to the practical stuff. How do we actually use all of this knowledge in our own love lives? Attached has so much good advice on this, and it's honestly been eye-opening for me. One of the biggest takeaways is that understanding our partner's attachment style is just as important as understanding our own. Because let's face it, we're not always going to end up with a secure partner, no matter how much we want to do.
Right.
Life has a funny way of doing its own thing.
So what happens when you're anxious and your partner's avoidant? Well, the first step is to recognize their deactivating strategies and try not to take it personally. Remember, it's not about you. It's about their own patterns and how they deal with intimacy. So instead of getting triggered and doing what Attached calls protest behavior, like clinging or getting angry or trying to force a conversation, try to communicate your needs in a calm and understanding way. So instead of saying you never want to spend time with me, you obviously don't care, you could say something like, hey, I've been feeling kind of disconnected lately. Would you be up for spending some quality time together this weekend? It's about expressing your needs without blaming or accusing them. And that can actually encourage your avoidant partner to be more open and responsive. Attached also talks about the importance of setting boundaries, especially for those of us who lean anxious. It's about learning to prioritize our own needs and not always trying to please our partner. Remember the dependency paradox we talked about.
This is where it comes in. The more secure and confident you feel in yourself, the less you'll need validation from your partner. And that can actually make you a more attractive partner. It's about finding that balance between closeness and independence and making sure you both feel respected and valued. Now, if you have an avoidant attachment style, attached encourages you to be more mindful of your partner's needs for connection and to find ways to meet those needs. Even if it feels a little awkward at first, it doesn't have to be anything huge or over the top. Just little things like sending a text during the day to let them know you're thinking about them, making eye contact and really listening when they're talking, giving them a hug when they're feeling down. Those small gestures can make a big difference in building trust and security. But one of the most empowering things I got from Attached is that we're not stuck with our attachment style forever. Like, it's not set in stone. We can actually change and become more secure over time. It takes effort and self-awareness, but it's totally possible. One way to do this is by finding those secure role models in our lives and learning from them. It could be a parent, a friend, a mentor, even a character from a book or movie. Think about the people you admire, the ones who just seem to navigate relationships with grace. What is it about them that you like? How do they communicate? How do they deal with conflict? How do they support the people they care about? By watching these secure people and kind of absorbing their ways of relating, we can start to shift our own patterns and develop those secure behaviors ourselves. Attached also talks about how important it is to work on our self-esteem and build a stronger sense of self-worth. Because a lot of those insecure behaviors like clinging, jealousy, or withdrawing come from this fear of not being good enough, like not being lovable or worthy of love. And when we don't feel good about ourselves, we tend to put those insecurities onto our relationships. We might become overly dependent on our partner for validation, or we might push them away because we're scared of getting hurt. So how do we build up that self-love? Well, there are tons of things you can try. Therapy, self-help books, meditation, journaling, even podcasts like this one. The important thing is to find what works for you and be patient with yourself. Building self-esteem is a journey, not a destination. I know all of this attachment theory stuff can seem complicated, but honestly, it's been life-changing for me. It's given me a whole new way of understanding myself, my partners, and how my relationships work. And it's helped me break free from those unhealthy patterns that were holding me back from experiencing the kind of love I deserve. So what are you waiting for? Grab a copy of Attached, do some soul searching, and start building those secure connections that will bring you joy, stability, and lasting love. You got this.